Uber Lilith, here we are again in Season 1, trying to defeat her as fast as possible while using the same setup we did before, but with the improvements of the Malignant Hearts. And the only way that I found to do this a couple days ago was to use Fist of Fates. And I think I've had a lot of comments regarding Fist of Fates, or more precisely, swapping gear during a fight, which is what you see me doing here, but I'm actually not swapping. I'm putting my original gloves back on, which were Fist of Fate, right? I thought I had removed them, but the problem is that for the second part of the fight, you pretty much need Fist of Fate to stagger the boss within about 3 seconds. That is your window to stagger the boss so that you do not get the little balls of fire that kind of follow you around and one-shot you, right? Which is what you see happening right here. So the only way that I found to do this was, unfortunately, with Fist of Fates until today. I think I have now a setup that works nicely without Fist of Fate. It is not necessarily perfect because you still need to use a new little trick that I learned in order to prevent the boss from going into certain animations, like breaking the ground around her. So you effectively kill her even faster. But you don't have Fist of Fate, but yeah, basically it's still not quite, I think, perfect in that sense. But anyway, all that said, I want to present now the updated Godlike and Stagger damage build that we presented about a month ago. I eventually followed up with another version of this build, which was a T100 and Uber Lilith build. I was trying to do a one build to do it all. It's not easy. But I'm getting pretty close yet again in this season right here. So let me start with the DPS portion of the build, which is the Uber Lilith fight. So let's go over the gear and the skills right now. But first, let me walk you guys through the run without the Fist of Fate to see the little differences. So number one, you will notice that we are not staggering her as quickly as we did before. So because of that, we have to hold back our DPS, or else she will go into the spawn phase, and then you will have to go through that whole thing, which is a lot harder. Not impossible, but it's a lot harder, all right? So once you get to a certain point, I'm going to say about 3/4 of the stagger bar, then you can start dishing out your DPS, and once you do stagger her, you will go into like overdrive, and then you're gonna basically kill her in a couple of seconds. All right, so this part is fairly consistent even with the gear that I'm going to show you today, but if you want to make it easier, definitely use Fist of Fate. They're a lot better at doing this, and you can effectively kill her even faster because of that, right? Because the bulk of your damage comes from when she is staggered. For the second phase, you will notice that I will not stagger her within the 3 seconds that I just mentioned, okay? So that means she's going to start the animations of the little fireballs, but we're going to use the other trick, that I've learned recently. I actually heard about this in the preseason, but I never really tried it. Basically, what you do is once you've staggered her and you effectively kill her in one go, you put on concealment, and if you go into stealth mode, she cannot target you, from what I understand, and then basically that ends the fight. So you save a lot more time, okay? Now let's check the gear and the skills. So we have pretty much the same setup as before, with a few key differences to make this work without the Fist of Fate. So again, these gloves are probably best in slot for this fight. In fact, for pretty much all boss fights, I swap them when I'm doing tier 100 bosses because it's a lot easier, it's a lot quicker. So again, if you have Fist of Fate, definitely use those. I even tried a slightly different pair of gloves that had some slow on it, for example. It wasn't enough, okay? It just doesn't seem to be enough. I believe that the immobilize on the Fist of Fate are what's really driving the extra stagger. But to make it work without those gloves, what you need to do, I think, maybe you guys can help me confirm this, is to add a lot of increased crowd control duration. This seems to increase the amount of stagger that you get from the other sources. It does not increase the amount of time she is staggered, instead increases the amount of stagger from your other sources, okay? So this combined with these boots right here for even more crowd control duration, and then some crowd control duration on our helm, is what seems to have done the trick. Although you could just hold back your DPS even longer, you may get a few extra animations from the boss, for example, when she flies away and does her kind of like one-shot mechanics, but it is not impossible. I literally showed that in one of my previous videos. that if you just control your DPS in the beginning, you can do it without all this extra crowd control duration, all right? But that's what I did for the fight that we just saw. As for the rest of the aspects, we have manglers. This is pretty standard by now. We have a fully offensive chest piece. It's far from perfect, but it works with Noxious Ice. Then the gloves, we now have smiting. The pants are the pants that we use for all the rest of the content, so it doesn't really matter. As for the boots, we dropped Frostbitten for this fight, and instead we are using the exploiters. And then for our two-hand crossbow, all stats I believe is really important because I'm trying to maximize on my stats, but it's not perfect for this fight. So that's because I dropped I don't have all stats on my helm, which I want to go back to. So again, not perfect, but I just wanted to show you guys the concept. Then for the other rolls on this weapon though, critical strike damage is useless against your poison ticks, therefore that is something that I need to optimize. As for our amulet, we are using energy cost reduction, which I think is really important, and then we have all imbuements and deadly venom this time around, not weapon mastery, and imbuement skill damage. This could be just regular damage, would work as well. No movement speed because we don't really move, and then we have the heart that basically increases your damage over time. Okay, so this is by far the best one. I've tried the other one, which is the all imbuements, doesn't even come close. All right, so this one is by far the best one for boss fights. So that's what I literally do when I'm doing tier 100 bosses. I would put on this amulet and I would put on the Fist of Fate. Then for our rings, we are using very similar rings as to what I said before. We just don't have crit damage on them because of what I just explained. So instead we are using damage to poison enemies or just poison damage. This one has life actually. And then for the hearts. So the hearts, we now have the one where we have the 6 stun grenades. I'll explain that once I do my next build video, which is the tier 100 speedrunning build. And then we have this one right here, which I overlooked. I definitely overlooked this heart when I presented my latest build update. I believe that this one is fantastic, actually. I just didn't read it correctly, or I didn't quite understand what it was really doing. I thought it only worked with skills that consumed life, which I thought was like Necromancer for whatever reason. But this works nicely to generate extra resource or save resource so that you have more, and then you deal even more damage with the skills that have consumed life, which is 552. This is the worst roll for that portion on this heart, but it's 552 health on almost 12k HP. You barely see it happening, and then you get a nice DPS boost. And then for the weapons, we are using both Condemnation and Ashira's Conjar because we're using combo points, and this just seems to be the overall best setup for the DPS portion. The specialization, like I said, combo points continues to be the best one. In fact, I'm now running this for the speed running tier 100 build as well. Skill setup is also pretty much the same, except for 2 little modifications that I want to point out. And again, I'm not entirely sure this is working as intended. So I would ask that you guys either confirm this or let me know what you think, okay? So puncture, twisting blades, the one that we have days obviously is really important. We are using our stun, shadow step for some extra stagger. But here's what I'm doing to what I think is generating extra stagger is we're using the knocked down. All right, so much like immobilize or stun, I believe that knockdown is probably a better source of stagger than, let's say, daze or slow that we get on our puncture and twisted blades. Okay, so not entirely sure this is working, but this is what I tried for that fight and it worked. Then we have 1 point into concealment to basically skip the entire last phase or the second phase, and then the rest of the setup is pretty similar. Okay, so it's basically the same as before. So we have subverting poison trap, we've got blended poison imbuement, we've got deadly venom with an extra 3 points, frigid finesse, then we've got 3 points in innervation, precision imbuement, trap mastery, and then we've got haste down here, and finally we've got close quarters combat. And finally, the Paragon points, a big work in progress here. Again, I am trying to come up with a universal setup for my Paragon points to do Uber Lilith, to do tier 100s, and eventually to do some PvP as well, which is something I really haven't gotten back to, and you will see that with my next build update, which is the tier 100 speed build, that I'm getting closer to what my original PvP build was. Okay, so again, I'm trying to make a sort of universal build to do everything, but it's not easy. All right, it's the point I'm trying to get at here. So here's what I am currently running, or that I use at least for this fight, and pretty much what I use for tier 100s right now. So we have closer still on our first one. We have turf. We've brought it back, but we've put it a little bit earlier. So we've switched this around here to be strength instead of intelligence. You will notice that we dropped the critical strike damage because it doesn't really help for the poison portion. It does help for the AoE portion when we're using the other heart, so for speed clearing dungeons, for example, but we have enough DPS regardless, so we decided to drop this little portion entirely. Then we're going into our deadly ambush. Here we're running the exploit. So exploit, I had removed it, but to speed run dungeons, this is a must. Now, the extra vulnerable for 3 seconds against Uber Lilith is not exactly useful. We do get a little bit of extra damage against vulnerable targets, which is useful, but I wanted it to be there permanently, all right? So the only way that I found to do this was to switch up the rest of the board so that we have the other important glyphs that we want to keep using. Then we go into cheap shot, which I have tracker. This could be efficacy here. I usually run efficacy. It's a nice little extra boost to these two nodes. I would have to do more testing to see which one is better to have permanently. So I'll get back to that once I do my next build update. We're still using Spearhead, which is great for speed running dungeons. And then we go into the next board. This one is Cunning Stratagem. We have here Diminish. I started using Diminish for the extra damage reduction so that we have a little bit of an easier time doing tier 100s, and then we're getting a boost to our rare nodes here, which is not the end of the world. But here's my problem: my stats are not quite there yet, so I'm also missing a 30.8% core skill damage, all right, to the build that we just did for Uber Lilith. So again, a little bit more optimization needed to get the benefit of all of these. And then we've switched up the last two boards, or the last board, into two to try and get another glyph in. So we went with this one is the Bane into the exploit weakness. Some extra vulnerable damage, and then we went to the final one was control into the no witness to get just some regular damage. Okay, so again, this is a work in progress. I'm literally just trying this out for the time being. What I really wanted to keep on my Paragon board was all these sources of extra armor. This is crucial for speed running tier 100s, but then we wanted to squeeze out a little bit more damage, and Eldritch Bounty was a very expensive board to work with for the extra damage that you got, where instead you could literally get 2 more boards for the same amount of points, or 2 boards instead of 1 for the same amount of points. Okay, so this is where I'm at with the testing with the Paragon board. I'm not sure I'm going to stick with this, but this is what it is for the time being. So I really want to have your feedback in the comment section below. Do let me know what you think. Have you guys managed to kill Uber Lilith so far? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.